You're knowing what you are wanting, an evolving thing, an expanding thing. You like the evolution of your desire? The answer is yes. Yes. We made you say it and you don't really mean it yet. Well, the question that we really like to ask is, you are among the rare humans who are really enjoying the contrast of your time and place. And almost no one says wholeheartedly yes until they remember that the contrast of your environment is what inspires your new desires. And the new desire is the summoning of all things. In other words, when you ask, it is given. So when contrast gives birth to a desire, that desire has summoning power. And that summoning power is life force. And so the more contrast you live and the more you sort through it and come to conclusions about what you want, you know how that works, don't you? The variety of your life literally causes you to give birth to new preferences. And when you do, energy, source energy, flows from source through you to your new idea. You know that you are source energy in a physical body. You get it, that you are an extension of that source energy. A leading edge extension, not someone here trying to catch up with something, but someone who is leading the desire, someone that is exploring the leading edge contrast to give birth to the leading edge desire. And when you do that, something very meaningful happens that most of our physical friends are not really aware of. The meaningful thing that happens when you give birth to a new desire is that the non-physical part of you becomes the vibrational equivalent of that new desire. It's a magnificent cycle. Do you know that the source energy part of you is eternal and that it remains non-physical even when you are physical? So a part of that which you are as non-physical energy expresses itself into this physical body. And as that part of you is now here, your ego, your me, your personality, as that part of you is exploring this environment, you cannot help but notice what you don't want, which helps you to identify what you do want. And when that happens, that non-physical energy that flowed from source to you as you were in this physical body now flows to this new idea. So what's happening constantly is a vibrational escrow is amassing on your behalf. A vibrational escrow that you began the creation of even before you came into this body, and you are continuing the creation of even now that you are in this body. So when we write a book and we call it the best title that has ever been given to any book, because it is so descriptive of how it all works, ask and it is given. And what that means is when your life causes you to ask for something, the source energy part of you becomes it. In other words, a better title for the next book even would be, it will be a very long title. I am source energy. I come forth into a physical body. My environment causes me to give birth to a new desire. Too long? My environment causes me to give birth to a new desire. And when that new desire is born, the non-physical part of me becomes one with that new desire. In other words, not only when you ask is it given, but when you ask, the non-physical part of you becomes that which you are asking for. And that source energy part of you then calls you toward it. The call of source is all about that. In other words, talk about a current, talk about an energy stream, talk about inspiration, talk about an impulse, talk about a stream that is flowing so magnificently that it takes quite a bit of effort to not go in the direction of it. It's a powerful stream. So when you go with the flow of that stream, we call that allowing. Allowing yourself to stay up to speed with what life has caused all of you to become. And when you don't go with the flow of that stream, we call that resistance. And that resistance is something that you learn along your physical trail. It's hard work to be in that state of resistance. Can you imagine taking your canoe down to the river's edge? You've got your oars already very securely attached to the edge of your canoe, and you put your boat in the water and you deliberately turn it upstream. And then you begin paddling against the current. And we say, why not turn your boat in the direction of the current and just go with the flow? And our human friends say, Well, that just seems lazy. And if we press them, they'll get even more defensive about it. They'll say not only that, but anyone who's worth anything is paddling upstream. It's just what we do. It's what my mother did. It's what her mother did. It's what my family does. It's what we do. We paddle upstream. This is the way that we acknowledge our accomplishment. It's the way we become virtuous. And we say, but how long can you keep that up? And you say, I'm willing to find out. Because all of the trophies and all of the monuments are given to those who work very hard as they paddle against the current. Because anyone can just let go and go with the flow. Where's the virtue in that? Where's the accomplishment in that? Why would you get a reward for doing something that is so easy? Something that anybody could do? And we say, because it's the way the universe has been set up. Because it's the promise of your future. Because, and here's the big reason, because nothing that you want is upstream. Nothing that you want is upstream. And you know how we know that to be? Because we are the source energy that you are before you were born. And we know the direction of that stream. We are that non-physical essence that becomes one with the preferences that you give birth to. In other words, we are there calling you downstream. And you know where we are? We're where everything you've been asking for is. We're where your future is. We're where your alignment is. We're where your clarity is. We're where your health is. We're where your abundance is. We are where everything that you want is. And we are calling you this way. And why you paddle that way is a mystery to the non-physical. You're learning it from each other as you are comparing your life on the basis of what others are doing. But you have a guidance system within you that is calling you this way. And if you're not going downstream, then you must be listening to some sort of other guidance. Some guidance that says there's gain in pain or there's value in struggle. And we want you to understand that all of that is resistance. It's all resistance. And it all works against you. And it eventually takes its toll on you. Jerry and Esther had a wonderful experience last month. They went whitewater rafting in Colorado with friends. And as they were driving in the bus, looking out the window of the bus at this raging river, they said to one another on many occasions, we must be out of our mind. For this river was really flowing. The water was very high and the river was very fast. And so it became very obvious to Jerry and Esther and their friends as they got into their raft that they were not going to have much effect in paddling upstream. The current of this river was such, it was obvious that going with the flow was the best way of approaching it. We want to call your attention to this flow that is the flow of your life experience. And we want you to see how hard it is for us to understand why it would not be obvious to you that going with the flow is the most natural and obvious thing to do. Why you would try anything else is odd. As Jerry and Esther got into the stream, they noticed that there were several places in the river where very big boulders, rocks, were rooted to the bottom of the stream. In other words, they weren't going with the flow. But because the flow of the river was so strong, those boulders that were stationary in the stream were taking quite a beating. In fact, such a beating that their river guide was very careful to point out to them, you don't want to get your raft up against one of those rocks. Because if you get your raft up against one of those rocks with this kind of a raging flow, it will beat you up. And then Esther remembered the disclaimer that they all had to sign before they got in the boat. Pages and pages of things that after the first paragraph Esther stopped reading because it was evident that the river guide did not think that many of them would survive this day. And as Esther saw this river and those rocks that were standing against the flow, she understood that. And we want you to understand that that's what happens to you sometimes when you get hold of something, you get hold of a justification or a defensive attitude or a rationalization, and you cling to the floor of the river, a river that, by the way, you are responsible for the speed of. Do you get that? Do you know that every time your contrasting life experience causes you to know what you don't want, even if you don't put words to it, you know what you do want? And when you know what you do want, when that preference or desire is born, that's what causes this river to flow faster and faster and faster. So the longer you live in your physical body, the more you live life, the more you precisely identify what you want, and the more you add to this flow. Do you know that you cannot say, I don't want that, without saying, that is what I prefer? This is the way the contrast works. So you get the river moving faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. But if you're pointed in opposition, then the river is beating up on you. And anytime you are pointed in opposition, that's what negative emotion is. In the moment that you let go of the defensive or justifying or rationalizing thought, in the moment that you release it, you stop paddling upstream. And do you know what happens when you stop paddling upstream? Your boat turns and starts going downstream. You don't have to paddle downstream. You don't even have to paddle your turn. Just stop paddling upstream. Let go of the oars. Let go of your determined justification or defensiveness or rationalization or beating the drum of what's wrong or explaining how you got there or explaining how long you've been there or explaining that it's not fair that you are there or complaining about being there. In the moment that you stop doing that, the river will turn you. And do you know, in the moment that you stop doing that and the turn takes place, you feel relief. So just stop doing that, paddling upstream. And as you stop doing that, the river will turn you and the river will carry you. And the relief that you will feel in the turning in the stream is everything. In fact, that is what we want you to focus your powerful now upon always. Am I pointed this way or this way in the stream? Am I paddling against what I've been asking for, or am I letting the stream carry me toward what I am asking for? Can you imagine Jerry and Esther putting their canoe in the stream, and as they're setting in, saying, wait a minute, and then they ask the river guide, how far will we flow in this river? Oh, about 10 miles, he will say. Well, I would like to get back in the truck and put my boat on top of it, and I would like to drive 10 miles back downstream, and then I would like to put my boat in just a few feet from where I'm going to take it out. Seems more efficient, doesn't it? In other words, why not start out right where I want to end up? And we say, what's the fun of that? That seems ridiculous when you talk about that river ride, doesn't it? And yet, it's the way so many of you behave relative to things you want. You say, I'm over here and I want to be over there. And then you say, and because I'm over here instead of over there, I'm going to be miserable as long as I'm over here. And we say, your misery has you pointed upstream and won't let you go over there. And you say, oh, well, the stream is strong enough. You said the stream was strong enough that I can't fight against the current. So I'll just fight against the current, and then I'll just let it be hard to get over there. And we say, why do that? Remember the rewards, you say. They'll write books about me if I paddle upstream. If I dig a big, deep hole and then climb out of it, everyone applauds. But if I just stand there, not in a hole, no one even notices me. Have you ever been in traffic that is not moving? Jerry and Esther have just come through California, and so there was a lot of traffic that was not moving. And they noticed that even though they were accustomed to traveling 55, 65, 75 miles an hour, that when the traffic would stand still, it was irritating. But then when it would begin to go, even the slightest little bit, they would feel relief. There was something about moving in the direction of where you want to go that gave them so much relief from standing still. And so we want you to understand that if you will begin to relax and not fight against the current by talking about what's wrong, by complaining about what's wrong, by pointing out that you're not where you want to be, by taking score of where you are, if you'll stop doing that, if you'll try to be just the slightest bit more hopeful or optimistic, or at least not complaining, that you will stop that resistance and the stream will turn you and you will feel relief.